Can you send it on? I'll send it to you. Oh, yeah, great.
Good morning. Yes, yeah. Everybody has to wear the mask all day. It's the new rules in university, so please, only the person who will be speaking will be allowed to wear the mask. But for the rest, you need to wear it all the time in the building. Okay? So, that's the rules. So welcome everybody. It's gonna be a long and very exciting day. We have our jury, external jury here, Commissioner and Daniel Samarvide. Thank you for coming. We lost one of the jury because of the quarantine, so that's a shame, but that's the time that things have. We just try to really keep the day going, really stick to the time. The students have 20 minutes to present, and then we have 10 extra minutes for comments. So all the students will finish, but the total time that the students have 1 hour, and we will be having breaks and lunches. So I think we already 5 minutes late, so we're gonna start straight away. Okay, I'm going to go to.
Just we're switching with Elena and Nancy to start.
Yes, because it's a project where the team should try to sort it out. Okay, so Maximilian. Oliver will tell you when you have 5 minutes to get that 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So hello everyone, thank you to be here. I'm going to show you a small presentation of my diploma project called Out of Frame. And I wanted to introduce this project through the genesis of this project and what's behind my final object. So everything started with some research of different kind of maquettes and construction. I was fascinated by the question of how can we read a text, a title, a photography, or the graphics differently than on a flat two-dimensional space. So I started to build different types of models, construction with glue, with plexi, with mirrors. And this was the first try that I have done. And the idea here was to create somehow different kind of floors and to connect one word that appears really frequently in the text. That word is typography. And the idea here was to create like stairs between different floors that create the transparency of the acrylic. So I made really different types of maquettes. This one is the smallest one that are based on the question of the reflection, and I was interested in how the typography and the pictures can be mixed together and can live or can live together in a small space, physical space. So for that kind of research, I was really focused in the visual aspect. I didn't have at this moment any content, real content to bring in this kind of space. I made also biggest models. This one is the biggest one. And here the idea was to create more kind of a city with different heights of buildings, if I can say. And that's really helped me to do this first part of the project, this research part. It really helps me to rethink and to build my final project that you will see after. So here I'm going to present you the concept of out of frame of my final object and the different rethink and concept that I have bring to my project. So after doing those maquettes and those experimentation, um, I had quite a problem or question that was to find content, a really precise content. And I had an interest on pages from the newspapers from all over the world. And I started to make a large panel of cover or front pages of newspapers. So going from Pakistan newspapers to Brazilian, from USA, from London, Germany, and from all over the world. And I made on these newspapers different kind of operation. So the first operations was to bring the things that I have learned on my previous maquettes. So the fact that we can create the space through the reflection of the mirrors, etc. So I had bring this notion of reflection of space through the dimension of the newspapers. I started also project on this flat news, um, and also to see how the newspapers react to the reflection of the mirrors and the projection. And the goal here was to see also the limits of how can we read, or how can we don't read anymore these front pages of the news. The other operation was to, it's quite a simple one, but I delete all the main text of the newspapers, and I just kept the title and the photography of the news. And suddenly, when I started to look at them without text, um, I was quite fascinated by the confrontation of the photography on one frame. So the idea was to see in one small format that the newspapers are, we can have, by skipping the text, we have different timeline of the picture, we have different countries, different points in the world, and different also poetics of the pictures and the photography in one precise frame or format. And this was, for me, a really interesting way to continue my project. So I focused and I focused myself to one precise newspapers that I have chosen, which is the New York Times, for different reasons. Um, the first of all is that I was also quite fascinated by the density, the graphic density of these these newspapers, and also because the New York Times give on the front pages quite a lot of different and many pictures that you can see on it. So, for example, the minimum of pictures that you can find is 4, and the maximum is 6. So I think it's the only journal newspapers that I have found that gives that much information. After that, I've chosen 5 precise news front pages of the news, which starts from the 6th of July to the 10th, to create somehow a timeline in my concept. After making those choices, I went back to this question of the photography and how it lives in the space of the front pages. And I started to make again a small operation on those pictures. I took the global pictures of one picture of the New York Times, and I started to recrop and reframe it. So I make it smaller. And what happened is that when you crop a picture, you have the things that you deleted. So there is an out frame of the pictures. There is the scene pictures that are on the screen, but there is the out frame of it. So that really interests me to bring in this project, it's two different layers of reading the photography. It's first the frame of the photography and his out frame, the things that you don't see. So I started to redesign, if I can say, every pictures that I have found on these front pages, and it gives me for each of them a new format of the newspapers, which completely broke the really repetitive systematic of the broadsheet format, that is the rectangle one. And it gives me also this notion of a new territory and a new territory of the space of the page and a new format. So for each of the days that I redesign and I have zoomed on the pictures, it gives me a specific and a special format and a special design for each of the front pages. So the black squares that you see are the pictures, the original size of the front pages of these newspapers, and what's behind is the reframed pictures. So here you see the models on a two flat dimension, but the project that you will see over there is, of course, three-dimensional aspect. And the idea here, but you will more understand after it, is that you have three different kinds of reading this news. The first is the out frame. The second level, the second floor is the text, and on the top of it, you have the reframed pictures. And this was the sequence, the series of the new design shapes, these covers. Thank you very much for your listening, and we're gonna see the project.
Yeah, so this is going to move into the live streams there. It's just streaming all the time, don't worry about it. If you take it over. See the live stream there. So if you take it over, yeah, and just set up, kind of line it up so that I can see. Is that right? Thank you. You're welcome. Tu peux te prendre ça, c'est de côté. Toujours.
So yeah, it follows the concept of the presentation from the starting point to until the end of the project. So I wanted also to see two different aspects of how to discover the models. The first one is that you see only somehow an elevation and something that really floats on the space. And when you look at on the top of each, you see the picture that are reframed. And this was the different floors that I was talking about in the presentation. It's the outframe of the picture. The second floor is the text, the information text, and the third one is the pictures of the tags. So we can go upstairs to the mezzanine to look at them from the top view.
Je fais comment pour l'étage? Ça fait combien que les 10 minutes?
Non, mais là, je reste ici, hein. Je suis pas faire monter là-haut.
How with still dimensional aspect. So there is this confusion when you see it from the top. There is no more way of two-dimensional and three-dimensional. And for the person creating the different heights of each different methods, I use different heights, values of the source because to following this idea of creating different kinds of buildings and also somehow create with the passing through the road in the city. And it's of course not. I want to speak about the technical aspects and so every pictures are printed on aluminium piece. So it's so you print on flat big boards after the and the FCR printed the same technique. The fits are the same material that so they are also and for the things was really important was also a part of the research that that he was doing that the main goal was to define the form of the things that belongs to the newspaper and that so I really have to be really precise about measuring and how it's going to be. I made each of the text through also with the others because it's quite fragile.
find the work.
I made also researches for the different materials that I use. So, and the idea was to create something that looks really static, but not so massive with the transparency. So, yeah, I've made research on different also types of depth with plexi and see how it looks. Does it looks more heavier or so for the book there are 4 parts, 4 chapters that that really follows the concept and the research of my diploma. So here you have the different chapters, starting from the basic one with the sheets of transparency, going to the 3-dimensional renders, the building of the models, and the final object. And here I made kind of fragments of the project that are fragmented just to have a global view. And the book, the idea was to create, for the concept of the book, the idea was to take every PDF presentation that I've been making since the beginning, from the pre-jury to the really first presentation, and I reframed and I recropped every PDF for doing my book, the research book.
And those are the same.
Yeah, those are the
you-
same. Yeah,
Okay.
set of view. I put also the construction. Yeah. And he was the first try with sheet of papers. This
So where does it come from?
it comes from a blog of architecture, and yeah, I was really inspired by this fragmented view of the plan of a house or a flat.
Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
So have some time for questions.
No comments more than questions. I mean, or questions. I'm still struggling to see what how do you define your final intervention in a theory process? Because for me, at the end of the day, I see that there is play with information. Basically, how do we acquire it? How do we absorb it? If we do, how is it given to us? And I don't hear you so much about the content side of things. What does it mean to overlay this teenage doing 1000 whatever he did, look after Tony Hawk and Trump. What does that mean, and how do you relate that kind of like content overlapping to your fictional buildings? Yeah. And maybe another question, it's the relation to architecture. I mean, how are those buildings, are those pavilions, are you saying that we could use text and image as a building component, of architectural component, as a place for meaning as well? More about the overlapping this.
To answer you about the content of the pictures, I wanted to show and also to show how the pictures that you see on the daily news are really specific and framed by a journalistic lens and eye. So it was for me the sort of an answer to see how a frame can be also a prison to a point of view or to, and it was an answer also visually and in a physical way. And, and it's related directly to these different floors that are fragmented to see these different aspects.
Because you're showing the axonometrical view.
Yeah.
This is a very specific way of representing architecture. That it's almost opposite to perspective, or it could be, considered opposite to perspective. Perspective is another very critical way of representing architecture, because usually you have one point of view or a few points of view, but it doesn't take into account, for instance, historical view and how we actually perceive things or hear things. But axonometry is clearly one of the most unreal or farthest from reality that. And I can see that you're working with extrusion as well, so it's very close to axonometry. There maybe would be interesting, to parallel these modes of representation, which have probably a lot to do with framing, or not allowing someone to see the whole of it, or even leave out any specific interpretation to what you're doing, to wanting into information. But it would have been interesting to us also study from the architectural side, what are the moments in architecture where actually one or the other representation technique was utilized for what purpose.
Yeah, to jump from what Daniel said, for me it's really interesting to see how we manage to make something physical out of something that is normally more 3D, more 3D style of an axonometry that is always virtual, or 3D is always virtual when you have these images coming to you. Or so for me, this is really good attempt to try to make it physical, to stop it one point. So this is it. But then we really miss, because in a 3D motor we can just jump around, we can be above, we can be under, and here we go to the mezzanine. That's already something. But then it should go further, because we should be able to. I'm short, so here I just have this flat layer, and then maybe you should be more crazy about putting on the floor, putting it somewhere crazier, and think about your viewer more. Because I always see how you finish everything very neatly, very nice. You're just, as we said in the Zoom, like typography, Swiss type, very nice, and this is really, really good job for me. But then we miss the crazy part about experimentation and. But really, I see a lot of interesting aspects. But the way you translate something normally virtual into something physical, that is really nice. But then I have a question as well. As you change the frame, but then is it a robot? Is it you? You're just the artist, the curator of this change of frame. Normally, it's a photojournalist that will choose to make this frame. But then, what's the question of your proposition? Like, will it be something always robotically, or will it be something curated? Or this is really interesting for me. Maybe you have something to say about it.
For the way I've been recreated it, so everything was done by my hands, and the idea was to get something really somehow an absurdity of the frame. So, for example, here on these pictures, I've been also cropping the pictures from the lots of them of the corners, And for example, when you see people here, I've cropped only their neck. So there is also an absurdity of framing that wouldn't be accepted or seen in a normal journalistic approach.
I think that's interesting, but what we're trying to find out is why did you want to do that? What does it bring as a supplementary level of reading to sculptures? And maybe you want to answer or not, I don't know. I think you can't be doing that without considering what we're going to interpret from you doing it. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the point here.
Yeah.
Is that you're creating this information, you're dismantling information, and you're the new responsible of creating a new level of information. And this new level of information has to tell us something, or must tell something for you at least. We would like to know what this is.
Yeah.
You know, you can't make these choices. It's interesting to do absurd cropping, but I think it has to have a relation to the story, or have a relation to you as a designer, what it is that you're interested about, contemporary newspaper and diffusion of information.
Yeah.
And what you gain from transparency, because you know the methodology of transfer that you have developed is very interesting in terms of experience. Let's say, you go from typography to photography to architecture to newspaper to image making to image cropping to image editing. So all these things, very freely you go from one to the other. But at one point, either you leave it out on random, you say, okay, I don't control this thing, but you don't seem to be the kind of guy who leaves things random. And then you say, okay, I'm just doing this transfer with whatever, so you can sort of like that happens to be a kind of like an ongoing, never-ending procedure. But I want to make it not like that person. Or else you have to stop at different levels and then dissect it, really, okay, where am I at now? And then actually read all the articles, because actually you also frame only on 4 or 5 days into your journey. So, I would have expected to go in depth at one point on what's going on during those days, what's going on during those days, text, image, sculpture, reflection, and all these different disciplines that transfer that you've been doing from one discipline to another. How do they, compile together? And what is the new meaning of it? How do you, is it analytical? Is it critical? Is it,
I'll put it there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sinon, on vous montre quelque chose.
Good morning, my name is Bertrand. Today I will be presenting you my project Model 001. I will invite Camille and Daniel to take part in the performance. Please enter the performance with the steps when the brushes start spinning. And then you can see on both sides. Thank you very much.
It's more space. Somewhere else.
You want to stay inside? Okay, let's just,
Yeah, let's have the visions. Live television.
very much. So now I will just tell you a little bit more about my project, how it came to be, and so my project, Model 101, is a continuation of my memoir, Carwash, in which I examined how the demonstration of the automotive transformed the shape of car washes in the 1920s and 1960s in the United States. In my thesis, one thing I wanted to pick up was what the experience of drivers was, of the drivers that were inside the vehicle while passing through the car washes. But I came to realize in the research process that this came much later from the 1960s. So since the late 2000 and 2010, many team car washes have opened across the United States, diamond car washes, floor car washes, jumbo car washes, but they really have one role almost more important than the washing itself, is the entertainment of the driver. My own experience of the car wash was therapeutic, calming, and entertaining. The more I studied the car wash, the more I became interested in removing the car from the equation and extracting the mechanisms of the car wash so that I would not only see it as a device to achieve humanness, but as a tool for a sensory experience in which entertainment, human entertainment, was at the core. In order to do that, I started to explore ways to transpose, to reinterpret those mechanisms to human scale without doing a literal translation of most of the translation of those mechanisms, but most of all to create an enjoyable sensory experience dedicated in a dedicated sequence of time. That is only 3 minutes. So the 5 mechanisms I identified in the car wash were the humidifying, foaming, brushing, rinsing, and drying. My interpretation of them is the steps you saw happening during the performance. So the cotton brushes, the UV lights, the projection, the floor lamps, and the bubbles, and the smoke machine. My process to find the proper interpretation was to look outside of the car wash in other spaces meant for entertainment. So, for example, the UV lights can often be found in laser tag or nightclubs. And the projection of color foam echoes from the Soirées that we all attended at some point in our life, but probably regretted. Another space that I looked at when I was scouting for reference to incorporate in my project was the background. For the color of my structure, the white was an evident choice as it reminded me of the washing machines of the 1940s that I dedicated my first chapter to in my memoir. And I talked about how the social hygiene movements of the late 19th century and early 20th century pushed for cleaner, ventilated homes and began introducing white cubes as opposed to the dusty wood furniture of the 19th century, as Adrien Forty explained in his book Object of Desire. The pattern of O that you see on the bottom is a nod to my first case studies, the 1920s auto wash board, in which cars were spinning to get rid of the dirt from their undercarriage, and it was creating a vortex in the water. And finally, the seating layout, the way we're sitting right now, and the lighting from underneath the structure coupled with the smoke could remind the user of jacuzzi. It's been from 1, 2, or 3 built in 1 couple times. And I wanted the users to also have a different experience depending on how many people were inside the structure, as it completely changes the experience and the reading you have it. And I wanted to explore how behavior are influenced by the presence of others and what you can do with space in the presence of others and not. So, for example, if you're in a car wash, in your car by yourself and with other people, what do you do? So this was also an inquiry that I was trying to investigate and serve ultimately with my project. So while I was investigating how to bring entertainment into one space, I came to question the function of the space. Can a space be used for something other than its original purposes? So, for example, the car wash was meant for cleaning, but now it's also meant for entertainment. Cleaning is almost secondary. How can I make entertainment the sole purpose of a space in times in which we are constantly looking to be entertained and stimulated? In the case of the car wash, as I said, the purpose is to keep it's entertaining. So in my project, it's no longer about children at all. It's really not what I wanted to get as far away as possible from that. But it's solely about entertaining you in a small space. It's even though it's aesthetically reminiscent of the car wash, it's not that anymore. The experiences have been extracted to create something brand new.
Then you work your briefing and the way you left the business work how you having to make stars. It's really you free on the side to do. You feel this for you, and the way it became structured, that's me and the hybrid way of this entities, that's really good for the work. Struggling to understand what sort in a bit somewhere niche or in a weird living room with a weird TV with a weird somebody type. So it's really interesting because it's pretty good content. So a lot nicer than all of the other. But yeah, good work. Really fun.
No, I think there's a very nice evolution. I'm still super interested by the topic and you seem to have worked on it quite thoroughly. Clearly, the theory of history part of it is something that really interests you quite in depth. I feel at least I have regularly this, but again, um, for me, what you don't go through yet is the mix of typologies. You're extracting certain typology from the power, which is very, very interesting. Yes. And I think it's about a lot of questions about even the urban typologies. In the US, these car washes are usually out of town. In Europe, sometimes not. And I think they could be even more in town and actually propose some kind of like new experience as well. Yeah, just for the anecdote, my very first time that I started to work at the head, it was not called the head yet. I accompanied an architectural diploma. He was starting to look into the car wash and he did almost like a contemplative chart almost, but it was a car wash. So I really believe that there is a lot of potential, and then when you bring it into domesticity, that as well. But then I feel that you could question a little bit more, the well-being of things, because if you go towards, well-being, how do you actually dissect the parts of the car wash and bring them, and there maybe it could have been interesting to look a little bit farther, because I think there you maybe fall into the trap of the imagery of well-being, where we are at now with lighting, even though everything seems to be very well referenced. But there is a bit of, in my opinion, there's a bit of redundancy between image, light, smoke, bubbles. They're all going towards the same direction. Whereas the car wash is almost like a collage of typology, from one method to the next, opposition almost. So there maybe it has been interesting to be less synthetic, even though once again I like the hybrid part of it, where you see the bath, you see the a sound machine, you see the screen. Yeah. Then on the thing itself, I think we're still lacking. It's still very shy, so it's probably technical. How immersive it is. I really think the script should be much bigger. That the scope should be much denser. There's a more immersive experience that keeps us out of what's going on outside. This is very important. But the images were really nice. Very 70s. Tend to agree? Was it that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you really feel all Brianino, it's music was kind of like atmosphere. But I think it could have been a little bit more contrasted, more interesting, and maybe a little bit more dissociated between smoke.
I think it's a difference. Honestly, that we have to do a little bit more because of the. So you have to keep the all pain because of this.
Because it's totally entertainable, and we could change it, so
I haven't heard before, but I like the sound of the because I think for me suddenly it was the most evocative of being in the car, like this waving and public of this kind of motor repetitive sound. I thought that was a nice addition, which is like the motor sound. No sound space music, but it's this other thing that is. I found that very I have not heard this. So I think that was an interesting addition there.
I mean,
The sound,
another
repetition.
very interesting thing would have been to do the whole loop and bring this back into the car, knowing that now cars they don't need to be driven. Then maybe we have to see the car, to Montreux, and in the meantime, we take a nice, maybe it will be interesting.
The use of textiles are really, I feel like a housewife in the 60s or something. The sound of love, and then the smoke. Well,
Thank you. The key to open the door from the home. Have the key to open the door.
It's open back there.
This one.
Après, sans tout ça, elle a des bébés.
Et ça part en finale.
Oui, oui, ouais.
La boîte derrière.
Il y a le bout du bateau qui commence à...
De la
Bah, ramenez-le jusqu'au bureau pour qu'on voit le dos. Et peut-être si on peut aller dedans.
Peut-être qu'on va dépenser là un peu, juste le temps après de passer dedans.
Ouais, mais la caméra, ça filme avec la caméra.
Thank you.
It was meant for 4 people.
Yeah, it was meant for 4 people, but because of the situation, because I will see.
Just check if it's the same settings on the black magic. I'm just wondering if they've reset.
Là, il faut mettre un mode là-dessus. You need to put a mode. It's on monitor. It's on monitor. HDMI.
Okay.
Now you have to connect to the computer.
But we never,
You didn't put on HDMI?
last time we never had
No, we
to.
didn't have to. Just so it's funny because we turned it off and turned it on. It was fine.
I'll try again.
I'm almost sure you have put it on HDMI.
The only problem I've got now, I can't set up. I'm suddenly going to have to start.
Just start again.
No, the problem is you have to do a whole new link.
Okay, well, it's up to you. Otherwise, we'll just leave it. So.
I sort of heard, but I don't understand how.
I'll do it in the break.
So at the end, what happens with Elena? She's not gonna
The
have
only thing, the reason it didn't work was like I had it on, it was working, and all of a sudden it stopped working, and then I just
Oh, it's delayed.
Yes.
I still think there's a setting thing with you, but I didn't.
Oh, nice.
Set itself.
The fate you are.
Hello, everybody who you are not here.
Who's here? That's she's here, the other member of
Yeah.
jury? Okay.
No, it's all the tutors, Alessandra
Okay.
as well, and the students who couldn't be here.
The girl from the cell will not be part of the jury, so
Ah, Monica.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
because that's not a fair way
it's a
to.
bit tricky, yeah. Okay. Qui sont connectés, je sais pas si on peut.
Yes. Switch. Ça, c'est les critères.
On peut pas voir.
Ouais. On découvre ça.
But maybe. But let's think. Yeah.
It's like an iron on top.
It's the same like
Okay, but like I also want. I want the whole. Yeah, I put the whole planted line.
No, but I told her that.
No, it should. It was, yeah, it was. So we have to use this. I'll just put it in. Oh, you have to press this whenever you move it. There you go.
So go where set rather than the set.
Look.
Setting, go back magic law and then go off progress.
Yeah, that, I don't know why that was changed.
This is what I mean, like everything's kind of got.
This was all like this, and this was that, 100%.
Just go HD.
Yeah, I did, and you said, oh, quality shit.
Oh, is that when you put it back up?
Yeah, but I'll
Okay.
leave it.
No, if it works with that, it's fine. As long as I just something get lost. So go back to that, go back to those initial settings, yeah? Where the settings button. Same button,
This is how it was. Initially it was like this, but I can put this.
Yeah, just try, just stick it actually.
So that was that, and then there was, I can't remember what it was.
In the break.
And there'll be a different thing.
I can,
I'm glad to go home.
It's gonna be in your minds every time you think,
Yeah,
oh, my
maybe
mask,
it was
Rosario, you
all
could hear my voice. He's wearing the mask inside out.
Oh yeah, nice. Wow, it's really clever to have to work the right way around. Just throw shit.
Yeah, the
It's
metal
all
bit
the
is on
dreads
top,
and and the metal bit is on top.
En direct.
Yeah, but let's see.
C'est en direct, hein.
I think it could be that before.
En live. Il y a ton premier live. Ah, tu l'as fait pas.
Corona and children.
Okay, Elena, so you are in your afternoon.
You know, like some how
We went to the deaf went triggering delivery of Turkish. You can get through stuff every day, you're not really happy. And you have to cut up some chemical stuff to kind of get it. You just had how many one? Oh, right. Oh, it's
Okay, I think the thing is now. Arno? Okay, maybe if we go there because there's no people. Yeah, but close there. I mean, close there, there.
today there are around 400 people compared to current process of living human diseases by 1996. Even though there is currently delivered in a lot of countries, this process only exists in the USA and Russia. Albert Life Extension Foundation, mentioned in the review, is one of the biggest corona foundations in the USA. Initially in California, Albert decided to relocate to Scottsdale, Arizona in the 90s because of the low risk regarding natural disasters and all year long weather. Albert claims that the cryonic facility is better if you are closer to the foundation, which draws a lot of members from all around the world to move near Alpha to have better chance to be well preserved when they feel it's their time to live. 30 minutes away from the foundation, you can find Sun City, a gated community reserve for people aged 55 and older. Developed in the 60s, it's the first gated community of its kind with strict rules, LCD specifically designed for the aging population. We could say it followed the cryonic lifestyle, as the healthier you are before dying, the better you will be when you wake up. I see Sensibility as a waiting room of alcohol. Since the beginning of my research, I linked both cryonic and waiting, making the waiting room a central element of my work. I wanted to offer an immersive experience to my spectator and not follow the sci-fi cliché in aesthetic, but build this experience with found objects and footages, reshaping realities and creating new fictions. Let's assume that one day crying will work. Every timeline we know today will change. We wouldn't be afraid of dying anymore. We will just be waiting for it. And dying wouldn't be an end, but a new beginning. That would affect how we see life and death, but also challenge our ethical and moral boundaries. With this project, I wanted to push those boundaries and play with the inevitability. Elsa, my main character and the narrator of the movie, killed people she thought members of Alpha. Led by the research she killed them. The answer to this question depends on your perception. It's the talking between technophobia and great belief in technology, and technophobia, mistrust in the same technology, a subject that I explored in my master's thesis research. The answer to this question also depends on your belief in cryonics. I ask again, is Elsa a serial killer? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very well done. I think, as we said before, the movie was the found footage is fantastic. And the way you choose to go to it's very simple, but very well chosen. And the carpet and the it's really well done. And yeah, I think it's very precisely and it makes us feel really strange situation and just the goal itself is something that gets so big and so intense that it's very, very well chosen. And I have no such question, just well done and
Yes, same here. I was already a fan of this work, and I think that you make such I would dare to say mature choices on the design set. You know, like and I can see my mind, kind of like doing the same, not the same, but maybe I'm not as mature as you, but you know, the same kind of like choices when you know, time wise and how you get the maximum effect, immersive effect, you know, the minimum of your work is displaced in this fridge chamber here, which is of course very complicated and difficult, but probably very efficient, and we have to do so much just the administration and logistics of it. So everything is very efficient. That's how the chamber works, cold, and also all this is small things. Okay, now it's cold. How do you do that? The blanket. So everything for me, I mean the immersive part is as efficient as the fuse. Yeah, there is the one for the club. It's Katie. Yeah, yes. She was appreciated. I think she was appreciated. Anyway, just a detail, but. Yeah, I think it leaves so much open still, because if you wouldn't explain it, if you were outside a school context, you wouldn't need to explain it so much, and then there's a lot open, a lot open because even cryonics is there, but it's not there so much. I do believe that it is still very close to science fiction, but a certain type. Distance for it, but but a certain very once again very precise and very clinical one. So
Yeah, I mean, for the presentation, the fact that the four people who they're supposed to be awakened, this is the way when they receive the information and you are being able to explain your story and it's four chairs of the four people, you know. For me, that's really reinforce the narrative of the film, that you become, you're a spectator, but also you are the protagonist. I think that's also really, like you say, it has many ways in which you can enter the story and feel part of it, or feel a spectator, or and feel a part of the kind of things untold with your own kind of perception.
And very few words you say at the beginning, and then just put them before. It's really strong because you shouldn't say more. And it's the first film of the in China.
Well, because it was very cold. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's Ségolène. Next, the lighting, Emma. Yeah. Okay.
On dit je sais pas si tu devais côté. Attends, non, je fais ça comme ça. Non, en fait, c'est ça. Non, c'est juste. Non, c'est ça, ça fait le tour de
lui-même soumis à l'interprétation au moyen d'une machine à tisser, qui est la Pustinger. J'ai pu garder un mode de production domestique, à la fois mécanisé et manuel. Ainsi, cela m'a permis de fabriquer un mode domestique dans un environnement domestique, qui a été le contexte par la suite, la décontextualisation m'a amené à me poser la question de la perception de quelque chose qui me paraîtrait étrange si on n'identifie pas le contexte de la perception. C'est alors qu'intervient cette forme abstraite comme étant pour moi le parfait exemple de quelque chose que l'on peut percevoir d'étrange, qu'importe son environnement. Aussi, assumer que le spectateur à sa propre interprétation, à la manière d'une étude d'anthropologie cognitive décrite par Pascal Bernier comme étant, je cite, ce qui permet d'émettre des hypothèses sur l'acquisition et la transmission des représentations culturelles basées sur la psychologie cognitive et l'étude du langage et de la perception. Ces formes viennent d'un jeu de construction qui sollicite les facultés cognitives, sur un jeu à boire, comme l'intuition et la perception. Je le transforme en un niveau de communication basique qui me permet de créer un effet à la fois reconnu et inconnu, qui lui donne un statut universel de par sa perte de contexte, puisque abstrait. Ma volonté a été que cet espace, donc ces formes, soient accessibles et visibles par tous, en dépit des différences de culture et de langage. Ce qui est en référence avec ma recherche théorique sur l'art indébélé et l'art graphique. J'ai voulu que le spectateur ou le visiteur puisse décoder et aborder cet espace selon son rapport intime à sa perception, à la perception qu'il peut en avoir. J'ai voulu solliciter l'imagination de chacun en tant qu'individu dans un monde où nous sommes tous stimulés via les technologies par des images qui nous permettent d'aborder le lointain comme proche et le proche comme lointain. On arrive alors à la phase 3 qui est la recontextualisation, qui est pour moi le lieu égal à l'objet au carré. Le tapis devient une version augmentée de lui-même. L'espace ici est à la fois l'objet et le matériau. En déconstruisant mon environnement, j'ai pu arriver au résultat d'un espace qui est la version augmentée d'un objet, qui est le tapis. Et me poser la question comment un matériau domestique, qui est le tapis, s'abstractise et devient exotique parce que abstrait, donc sans contexte. Et l'enjeu ici a été de formuler cette théorie dans un espace et avec un mode de production qui m'a permis non seulement de travailler la forme, mais aussi la production d'un objet domestique, connu en jouant avec ma propre perception de mon environnement et des objets et des objets. Et donc cet espace est une invitation pour nous à la fin du monde.
We can do the comments in English. More for my benefit.
And the way you intrigue us is absolutely would be done because I'm too intrigued and never seen such thing before. And the use of the project as it's something so common and so flat, so we really care about this. So I think now the way you make them talk about it, this is really interesting. But then I don't know how I should interact with them. It's hard for me to say, should I go under it? Should I just look at it and feel this is weird? Or what should I do more? Should I sit on it? Should I climb on it? Should I touch it? It's you just throw us into this and without maybe we need a little bit more of an input of you to know what are we allowed to do because it feels should we go under it? Should we pass through it? Or but I think loads of questions rise. So did you have mode d'emploi first?
No, there is actually no rules.
Mhm.
It depends how you can interpret it. For example, for the flat one, you can walk on it. It's not a big deal because it's still a carpet. I don't know.
For me, the way it just reminds me of an arbre à chat.
Yeah.
Because it's maybe the color or something, and the where it's a non-object because it should be very usage specific, but then it's not at all because we really is struggling because we in between and.
But it's interesting because you're not the only one send me Rasha. People send me as well. This one looked like a horse. Or bridge, or rainbow.
But I think you manage really the way you extract all the usage, all the. But then we're struggling because we want to have a usage but it's nice that you challenge try to keep it open and to keep it without usage and without.
First, my goal is to invite you in my own interpretation. So I do have a little All the things I do with the same form of yeah, at the beginning, I called it abstractization because for me it was a process of abstractization. So it was like more inventé.
I think I would like you to, is, for your questions, is I would like you to interact the way you, as a creator, you would interact. So I know we will all do it differently, but I'm interested in the way you would do this.
And describe your interpretation.
Yeah.
My
Your
interpretation
specific
of
one.
it.
Or if you don't want to speak it, like it's not something to put in words, you
Yeah,
can perform it.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
interested in the way in which you say everybody can interact in their own way. I like to see you interacting
Exactly.
in the way you would.
But for me, there is not
So for you-
interaction with this
So it's just to look
physically.
at.
No, yeah, it was mostly the process of how I draw this game and interpret the form, and as well to imagine it in a 3D for the raw contextualization and how I can make a space with it.
So
Yeah, because deambulate, it's
Yeah,
easy. Just
Yeah.
go and deambulate. But I want you to make just if we can see you deambulate as your own way in your own shapes. Because it would be different if
But
we are.
honestly, I don't need that personally. I don't need to perform.
Yeah, you can. But actually, I don't want to use this
But maybe what's interesting is that whatever you don't want or you want, maybe it's out of your reach once you put these things there. And this is what it's interesting because I would love to call it furniture, actually, but good one, actually, not not commercial one, not with a functional purpose, but something that exactly proposes a certain number of possibilities, not one, or not two, or not three, but and you don't have to give it a name. You don't have to say this is a piece of, I don't know, kitchen furniture or sitting, and that's what it becomes interesting, because you cannot avoid that either. If you leave interpretations open, then some interpretations will happen. So maybe some people would love to sit here, and you cannot avoid that. And then from that moment on, I think you also have to consider that it can be used as furniture, whatever that means, without necessarily identifying what furniture has to be, and then maybe treat it a little bit as such. And it could become even playful to suggest things that cannot happen, or
Yeah, but
to become a little bit more, let's say, complex, or even pervers, with what you suggest and how you should use it, and the sense, because it's still a carpet. All these things, they have dimension, they have scales. So, and they're not 5 meters high, or they're not 30 centimeters low. So it's body related, clearly, and gesture related. So this is something that you can. So actually, I really enjoyed the way your work developed in that sense. But then once I'm in front of this, for instance, for me, I want to know what's inside. Why cannot I, is it just glued, or is it like full of carpet, or those things that actually become very interesting if you're doing actually furniture design. Then you should deal with it.
Actually, that aspect of is it glued or not is also an interesting and important variable, because we talk about interpretation. But I've noticed some elements are not glued. So this is also, does the user also have the choice to displace or move certain elements? And this also generates another level of interpretation, right? Because then you're also changing the aspect. So is this something you intended to or not? Because you deliberately glued some and closed things, but some things are also still capable of moving. So
I think for the documentation you're going to do afterwards, it's really important to figure out, is it going to be in your grandma's interior, or is it going to be in a white box? Where will you situate these elements? Will they be? Yeah. No way. Yes, but then I think it's really nice.
I think for me this is you have. I feel you need to have a position. It's not only it's what you want it to be. I can live anywhere. For me, I know, understand this, and we are having this experience. But I think you, as a maker, sure you have an intention. There is an exploration that explores a subject, and this is what I like that you have a strong position of the work in the realm in which you work, and then it's great. We interpret. You don't need to tell every single person. If this was a museum, people walk, they come and they go. But in terms of when you talk about your work, personally, I feel a position is important because, like you were saying, you can claim this is furniture, but you can use it as you want, or you can call it sculpture, but I call it whatever. I know you don't want to commit to call it anything, or you're just interested that you follow a process to arrive to this, and anybody can think whatever they want. But I really want you to think that you don't have to tell me now for your documentation. It's not for your exam. I really you need that kind of anchoring of your investigation and where you place this work for you, which is how you talk. And then everything is always interpreted by others the way they want. You can't avoid that precisely. I know that's your interest in how people interpret. But it's interesting the line between what you pretend and you would try to do. And what you're trying to do is teasing people to think things could be, this is your position, is I'm only interested in teasing people to think what things could be. But that's the position. I think that's important to declare. Even if it's just teasing people, that's my interest.
Can I ask you about your education? What did you do before the master?
Les Beaux-Arts.
Okay. Yeah. So what is going to be your title after the master? Designer, I guess, right? Yeah. And are you interested in that title or not?
Yeah, but for me, there is not too much difference between to be an artist and a designer. I can make something like a designer. For me, it's like cheval de Troie d'un artist. I can go in the vitrine of the shop and expose it has on the gallery. And
I know I was asking because I agree with you, but at the same time, I was gonna just for the exercise, I was gonna push you to be a designer. You know, and designer is quite a large definition. So you can inhabit it with a lot of different costumes. So that's large enough to they know more than I do. You can inhabit with a lot of ways to tackle it. That's why. But once you get to be a designer, then there are things that you don't leave out, and as I was saying, the materialization of it. And then I appreciate the word because you did this with your gun, right?
Yeah.
So this is part of a designer's work, clearly, but this as well, So I think the step further on this work would be to tackle this piece as a design piece. Now it feels to me that you are very concentrated, but maybe I'm wrong. You're very concentrated on the theoretical part, which you seem to have really studied quite thoroughly. And then this is maybe just an illustration of it, like a moment of your position towards that theory. And then, okay, this is what exotization looks like. And I think as a designer, everything is much more complex all the time, actually. You cannot stop this thing at one point. Because once again, how about this is a shelf and someone's going to use it very decoratively at their house?
For me, that's a parallel between have the gun and make my own material to create something, and the theory. It was something separate at the beginning. So I don't have the feeling to translate.
It's just lots of questions I think you can think about for the next stage.
But I think this is really important for the documentation. It's nice to have this kind of.
But for this presentation, the point wasn't to give you a lot of clue of my project because it was the bit.
The goal.
because there is a quote on the floor there, and Jean-François Satak is explaining that if you give too much clue on what you see, you lost the principle of exaggeration because the things are more visible.
But what is a bit maybe strange is that you give us loads of clue about the theory, about exotization, about where it comes from which guy. This is precise. But then you throw us into something so open that maybe for us it's the way you present it, that maybe you should throw people first and then give them a hand, how you read the piece and how you understand the piece. But another point for me is really nice how you turned the elements you did that were really nice with the shapes and the flowers, if I remember, or the shapes that were really precise and really charming for the eye. But now it's charming for the eye, but we have so many questions that really you turned your project a step further. So for me, this is a really good point. And the Armasha references.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're gonna have a coffee break, which is still, I don't know, Oliver? This is a